and we're going to go ahead and get started. We have an important lesson today, and it's one that brings with it quite a challenge. We've been studying Proverbs to grow in wisdom, and I think we would all agree that that's a noble pursuit for us to be going through. And I'm just curious, has anybody learned anything new in the last couple of weeks? Anybody? You feel like you've been maybe stretched a little bit? That was the intent of it, right? You know, maybe getting a slightly different perspective on wisdom. I would tell you that I have not figured out the way I'm most comfortable teaching this material yet. I'm still figuring that out as we go here. But what we're going to do today is probably a little different than what we've done in previous weeks. But we're going to start out, we're going to read Proverbs chapter 4. I'm only going to do NIV today, just for the sake of time. We got a lot to get through. And so we're just going to go through one. If you have other translations, by all means, follow along and pick out and glean anything that you can from that. But Proverbs chapter 4 reads, "Listen, my sons, to a father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. I give you sound learning, so do not forsake my teaching. For I too was a son of my father, still tender and cherished by my mother. Then he taught me, and he said to me, take hold of my words with all your heart. Keep my commands, and you will live. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. Cherish her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will give you a garland to grace your head and present you with a glorious crown. Listen, my son, accept what I say, and the years of your life will be many. I instruct you in the way of wisdom and lead you along straight paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered. When you run, you will not stumble. Hold on to instruction. Do not let it go. Guard it well, for it is your life. Do not set foot on the path of the wicked or walk in the way of evildoers. Avoid it. Do not travel on it. Turn from it and go on your way. For they cannot rest until they do evil. They are robbed of sleep till they make someone stumble. They eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. The path of the righteous is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full light of day. But the way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know what makes them stumble. My son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them, and health to one's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil. Keep your foot from evil. So obviously, wisdom is a big topic in what we're looking at here. But I'm curious, for those of you that have your Bibles open, does this chapter have a header to it?
Get wisdom at any cost.
Get wisdom at any cost. Wisdom is supreme. I'm not quite ready for this, so let's get these down. So your headers, and remember, these headers are man-made headers. They're not in the scrolls. You're not going to find them there. These are, somebody has gone through, they said, I think this is a reasonable topic for this section. So what do we have here? We have wisdom is supreme. And Bob, you had get wisdom at any cost? Anybody else? Security and wisdom. There was one over here. A father's wise instructions. And see if I can spell instruction. I think that's right. Anybody else have one?
Mine was 3.
Oh, well, are they short? No, go ahead. Let's have them.
The first one's a father's example, but the second one says 2 ways of life.
A father's example. 2 ways of life.
And the straight path.
And so those are just broken into different segments throughout the chapter. So 2 ways of life, and the last one was a straight path.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody with anything else? Those are all accurate, aren't they? Those are all, those are, wisdom is supreme, wisdom at any cost, security in wisdom, a father's wise instructions, a father's example, 2 ways of life, a straight path. As I was preparing this, for whatever reason, I thought of Back to the Future. Now, I don't know, has anybody seen Back to the Future? Most of you, a good many of you have, right? So when Doc Brown gives Marty McFly some instruction, and Marty's mind is blown, and he says, "Doc, that's heavy." Does anybody that? That was sort of his phrase. That's heavy. This is heavy stuff here. Wisdom is supreme. Security, this is heavy material that we're looking on. In my text, I had get wisdom at any cost. And I thought, man, is that heavy. Any cost. Any cost. It made me think, have you ever come across something that you sort of put a limit on the price you would pay for it? There's something. So, big topic in society right now. So if anybody ever watches this down the road, the price of eggs has spiked, right? Has it not? What's it like? It's $6, $7 a dozen now. They should be 99 cents or something like that. There's this whole thing. And I got to thinking about, I was going to a company meeting in Baltimore many years ago. And along the way, I was riding with a couple of folks. We were going in the morning, and we stopped at a Cracker Barrel. And I like pancakes and bacon. But if you do pancakes and bacon separately, they hose you on it. But if you get the meal that it's pancakes, bacon, and eggs, it's usually cheaper. So I just said, I will take the pancakes, bacon, and whatever it was called, the Country Supreme, whatever, the Country Platter, whatever it was. And so okay, well, you want pancakes, you want bacon, how do you want your eggs done? I said, I don't even want the eggs. And they said, really? I said, if you want to, give me an extra slice of bacon in place of the eggs. And at the time, I remember my waitress's reaction. She was like, I don't know if we can do that. Bacon is really expensive and eggs are really cheap. And I got to thinking, I think it's now cheaper per slice of bacon than it is per egg. And I'm like, well, they'd probably do that all day now. Hey, I don't want the eggs, just keep that bacon coming, right? That's I'm all for that, right? They were. Now I would tell you that they did end up giving me an extra. They kept my eggs and they gave me an extra slice of bacon. But I think they would make that trade all day today. The other day, Trace and I are in the kitchen, and she looks at the mess that's before her on the stove, and she says, I think I'm going to have to tell Taryn to stop, or that she's going to have to cut back on the eggs. So Taryn gets up in the morning, she does the eggs, and we don't care we love that they love eggs, But when Taryn does this, she just makes a mess. There's crust all over. I mean, it's just a mess. And then she leaves for school, and she leaves this behind. It was, I'm reasonably sure that when Taryn makes 2 eggs, she wastes the better part of an egg and a half in the process. It's just sort of slopped all over the place. Is that a fair? That might be
probably at least a half an egg.
at least half of it.
Scrambled eggs make such a mess. I don't understand.
Yeah, well, she makes a horrible mess, right? But it's when you have all that waste, you're like, oh, I don't know that's worth the cost, right? And if you think about it, there's probably been many things that we've encountered in life where we said, I don't know if it's really worth it. I don't know if it's worth that cost. I think I have shared this with you before, but maybe not. My dad at one point here in recent years was finally exposed to the idea of a tomahawk ribeye steak. Has anybody seen such a thing? It's like this. It's this steak that has this giant bone on it, and he's just like, oh my goodness, I would love a tomahawk ribeye steak, until he saw the price. And then he's like, I don't know. He can't wrap himself around that a steak like that can be that expensive. And he struggles with that. Now, and maybe this becomes even more difficult as we go through life, because we can remember when certain things cost much less. Like what was the price per gallon on gas when you started to drive versus what it is today? Like, doesn't that hurt? Yeah, it was about $1 a gallon whenever I started to drive. That was where I was. But when we see the price of things, oftentimes what it does is it challenges us to think, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is it possible that a tomahawk ribeye steak could cost $50? Is it possible that a tomahawk ribeye steak could cost $100? And the answer is yes, it is possible. It is possible for some of these fancy steaks to cost that much. But here's the other question of, is it worth it? Is it worth $100? Right? And many people will just automatically answer the question, no. Oh no, it's not worth that. But I think there's a challenge with that, because I don't know how many people have actually had, I know I haven't had a $100 ribeye steak. I'm just out of curiosity, has anybody ever had a $100 ribeye steak? No? Is anybody at least interested? Like, would you like to at least sniff it? I would like to at least smell it, right? Like, just put me in the room with it for a while. Let me salivate near it. Like, we can't answer the question of if it's worth it truthfully. The truthful answer to the question of is it worth it is I don't know, because you've never tried it. But deep down inside, likely we have some doubts. In verse 7, Solomon gives this instruction, and you may want to underline this. He said, though it cost all you have, get wisdom. That is quite an instruction. So it must be very valuable. It must be worth it. Now, we've talked before in this class, and I don't know that there's many of you here who are new and probably have missed this little mini lesson that I've done, but we've talked before about how money is not a physical thing. Money is a spiritual thing. And the way that I illustrate this is that if I gave each one of you a $100 bill and I sent you into Walmart, you would all come back out with the same thing or different things? Different things. Why is that? It's because it's an expression of your spirit. Some people will go into Walmart and they will come out with shoes. Some people will go into Walmart and they will come out with ammunition. Other people will come out with clothes. Some people will come out with candy. It's all an expression of your spirit. Money is a spiritual thing. And so the thing about money is we talk about it, it circulates, right? It goes all over the place. There's some language in this passage, and this is what I want to get to today. In our bodies, something circulates, right? It's our blood, and what pumps our blood? It is our heart. Chapter 4 is about wisdom, but I'm going to suggest to you that it is also about your heart. You see that word sprinkled throughout this chapter? It's in there. It's in there. We must be aware of our hearts. 4:23, above all else, guard your heart. That's some wisdom, isn't it? Now, you've been with me long enough to know that let me stutter some more here. We simultaneously exist three ways. We exist in a physical way, we exist in a mental or intellectual way, and we also exist in a spiritual way. Right? Now I've had a hard time wrapping my arms around this, right? How is it possible to be three things at three times? But I'm telling you that it is. The way that I finally was able to start to understand that you can do multiple things at a time is that at the same time I can be a father, I can be a son, and I can be a brother. Right? I can fill multiple roles at different times. And so we fill these roles. There is our physical part, right? We're in the physical world. There's what goes on in our head, and then there's also what goes on in our heart. And there's some connection between those particular things. And it is through one of these ways that we connect to God, right? There's some people on planet Earth that think that the way that they are going to connect to God is by doing a lot of good deeds. They think that they're going to, in some physical way, do enough good things that God's going to say, I have no choice but to let this person in. That's not what the Bible tells us. I would direct you to 1 Samuel 16:7. We're going to look at the second half of this verse. This is on the selection of David to be king. But God says to Samuel, he says, the Lord does not look at the things people look at. The Lord doesn't look at the physical. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Looks at the heart, right? Romans 10:10. Paul writes, for it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. So we need to understand that we are not saved by knowing who God is. Having the intellect to understand that God's there, that doesn't save you. Paul tells us it's your heart, it's the spiritual thing is what saves you. And consider what Jesus told us. Matthew 22:37. You've heard this before, but he said, Jesus replies, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. Jesus commands us to love God first with our hearts. Our connection to God is spiritual in nature. So let's go back. Proverbs 4:23. It says, above all else, guard your heart. Your heart is so important. Guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Solomon is hitting the heart. Now, if we were to look at the first 9 verses of Proverbs 4, This is about how do we understand the need to guard our heart. We need to guard. He's given all this caution. Pay attention. It's like he's doing all this setup, right? He is doing what we can to what he can to get your attention, because it is so important that you guard your heart. And we've talked about this in various ways before, about it's from our heart. Let's see if I can word this poorly. The note that I wrote here is that it's about knowledge and behavior. Okay. Knowledge and behavior. Do any of you know the right thing to do but not do it? Do any of you know something to do but your behavior doesn't match? Okay, so this is where we all say yes. Okay, we're friends here. We all know there's some certain things that we should do. We ain't doing it, right? There is some connection between knowledge and behavior, and I think we may call that wisdom. It's one thing to know the right thing to do. It's another thing to do the right thing, right? Now, in my pharmacy training, it was such a big thing that we would talk about patient education. Oh, you got to educate the patient, blah, blah, blah. And we would actually have these competitions where we had this flashcards with all these different medications on them, and on the back there was all this information. And we would have patient counseling competitions. Biggest bunch of junk you're ever going to see in your life. And the idea was you would sit down with the patient, and the patient would say, oh, I'm taking Tylenol, right? And you would be able to say all these many things about, and you would just be able to dump all this information on somebody. And what we thought was that if you just dumped enough information on somebody, they would magically do everything correct. They would magically do everything correct. I heard it explained this way. People are like a cup, or a bottle in this case. And the idea is that if we could just fill them up, if we could put enough knowledge into them, automatically they're going to do the right thing. And I would do this at board reviews. I'd be in a room with a couple hundred new pharmacy grads and trying to have some fun with them. They're a very nervous group of people. But I would have one of them get up, and I'd have them hold a cup, and they would have pitchers of water all over the room. And I would pick up the pitcher of water, and I said, I'm going to start giving you that information. I'd start pouring water in the cup, and I wouldn't stop. I'd dump water all over their hand, right? Because that's the way we thought about it. It was that if we could just possibly, like at some point the line's going to get high enough, and you're going to know the right thing to do. At some point, right? But there's a lot of people who are walking around today, and you know what their cup's upside down. They're not even letting anything come in, or it's sideways, right? Like one of the things we have to do is it's not just getting them the information, it's just not the knowledge. We have to do the behavior, because that shows what's connected to your heart, right? That's where we are. I've gone off my notes here a little bit, but that's the 18-inch lesson, right? That's the difference between knowing what's here and what's here. Like it takes something to, like it just doesn't automatically migrate from here to here. It's that behavior, and in the church we have a special word for that. It's called discipling, right? How do you help people develop those behaviors, right? How do you help it move from what you know to what's in your heart, and it becomes what you do, right? Wisdom is the connection to the heart. When we look at the next part of Proverbs, how am I doing time-wise? I'm not doing very well at all. 4:10 through 19. We talk about, and this was my friend here, the two paths, right? Is that where it's the two paths. In Solomon, I'm going to try to write and speak at the same time. That's not working well for me. But he gives this comparison, right? We've talked before about how in Proverbs, there's a lot of language that's used, and it's very contrasting. So there's the way of wisdom and there's the way of foolishness. There's the way of the righteous and there's the way of wickedness. And it says, the path of righteousness is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full of day. Right? So you have one way, which is bright. This is supposed to be a sun, right? And the other, which is the moon, right? It's dark. One of the things that we need to ask ourselves is, what path are we on? Are we seeing light or are we seeing darkness, right? The next part of Proverbs, verses 20 through 27. Solomon talks about protecting your heart. And I'm going to turn the page for this. Protecting the heart. Guard your heart, he says. And there's a couple of things that we need to know to do, right? How do we do this? Verse 23, he says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And so one of the things that we need to do is we need to guard what comes in. Right? It can't come out if it doesn't go in. We have to guard what goes in. What we consume affects our heart. Luke 6:45, maybe, reads, a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. And an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. We have to guard what comes in. Paul writes in Philippians 4:8, he says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. That's what you should be letting come in. Think about those things. We need to know what comes in. We also need to guard what comes out. There are certain things that come in, but you know what? We have the choice as to whether or not we're going to let it come out. I was at a basketball game. Well, maybe you would call it a basketball game. We didn't score very many baskets. There was a ball, it was being bounced, just didn't go through the hoop enough. It's a personal problem. But there's things that go through your head, like perhaps we should try kicking the ball, right? Maybe we should try kickball. Maybe I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss. But you know, the thing is that I have to guard my words because I recognize that some of these thoughts can be rather destructive towards youngsters. Right? After this game I was at yesterday morning, I went to see my niece play. And I actually heard a story about how destructive words were because words were not guarded that were in the heart. Has anybody ever had a bad thought? Anybody? Like, Henry's not. I mean, I think very highly of Henry. I thought if there's anybody that wouldn't have a bad thought, it'd be Henry. But Henry's been to a basketball game, and Henry has seen a bad call. We saw one Friday night, didn't we? We saw a couple Friday night, right? And you have to guard your heart. You have to guard your heart. Our words and actions reflect the conditions of our heart. Proverbs 4:24 reads, keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. Matthew 12:34, the second half of this verse, reads, "For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." There's part of this lesson which is challenging to me. And it's because whenever I started out to teach a Bible class, what I was most concerned about at that point was improving Bible literacy. It was actually Pastor Kent who made a comment from the front of the church many years ago. It went something like this. He said, 2 generations ago, people knew what was in the Bible and they knew where to find it. A generation ago, people knew what was in the Bible, but they didn't know where to find it. And he said, today, people don't know what's in the Bible, and they don't know where to find it. And I thought, ouch, that hurts. That's a little too accurate. It's a little too accurate. So I set out on a mission to improve my Bible literacy, and I invited some people to come along with me. You were a reflection of that journey. Because if you would have put the names David, Abraham, and Moses on the table, I would not have been able to tell you which one came first. I didn't know. I was not literate in the Bible. If anybody is wondering, it's Abraham, then Moses, then David. I'll let you off the hook, right? I won't make you go do that. But it was interesting. You see, I started out when I started teaching that class, when we started doing the chronological study of the Bible, I very much viewed it the same way that I was trained as a pharmacist. You were all just a bunch of cups. I'm just going to pour water in you, and magically, you're going to become better believers. Magically. At some point, you're going to get enough information, it's all going to click, and you're going to change. And that's not the way that it works. Where it started to change is when I was challenged about, don't just give people information, give them application. Give them application. So now, most Sundays, I still forget to do this on occasion, but how do I end each lesson? Anybody? Act. I put ACT on the board, right? Because that is a challenge for you to apply. Now, I have no misconceptions. There's many of you who do not apply. I'm not surprised. There's times I don't apply. There's many times I don't apply, right? But sometime, somewhere, you're going to do it, and it's going to, and you're going to have such a connection where you're going to I'm going to keep doing that. That was worth it. That was worth it. That was valuable to me, right? People need help. People need help to take knowledge and transform it into wisdom. They need help with that application. So how do we apply this today? Psalm 139 verses 23 and 24 read, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." The application on this lesson today starts with an examination of your heart. Are you where you want to be? How is your heart? And there's an important question that you need to ask, and you need to answer it. Don't answer it here. Right? Maybe you want to write it down. But do I trust God with my whole heart? Do I trust God with my whole heart? Or am I relying on my works, or am I relying on my intellect? What am I doing? We talked about this, I don't know if it was last week, the week before, but we live under a king. And in the kingdom, what does the king own? Everything. Does he own everything of you? Or are there some things that, I'm holding this back? God's the king, he's sovereign on all this stuff, but this part of it, that's off limits to them. It's an important question for us to consider. Do you give everything, including your heart, to your King? What is the heart posture that you start with? So we need to see where our heart is right now. The next thing is we need to monitor what comes into our heart, right? What are the things that comes into our heart? And one of the things that came up on the list was, what type of media do you consume? Out of curiosity, who here is not on some type of social media? Is there anybody who's not good for you? Dan? Most people are on some type of social media. Now, I'm going to take a step back. I'm not going to tell you social media is good or bad. I'm going to say it's going to be very much a reflection of your heart, and this can hurt. This can hurt because when you get on social media and you start looking and you start scrolling, what type of stuff do you see? Is it stuff that gets you happy, or is it stuff that gets you angry? Is it stuff that agitates you? Like what are those things? Are you bombarded by political thoughts, which are for or against your political persuasion? Are they things that you get frustrated with? Are you bombarded by sports things? There's some people that's like in full transparency, my social media is comic books and G.I. Joe figures. Doesn't say a whole lot for me. I get it. But you have to be aware of that. What is it that you're bringing in? Remember what Paul told us to focus on. He said, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. Is that what you're looking at? Is that what you're reading? Is that what you're consuming? Is that what you're letting into your heart? That's a great way. And you know what? If there's stuff on there that's coming in and you say, you know what? This is not admirable. This is not noble. This is not praiseworthy. You know what? You can stop it. Just turn it off. Find something that is. Find something that is. Your social media is a mirror to your thoughts. On Sunday morning, I get an alert typically around 9 o'clock that says, this is how much you were on your phone this last week. You were on your phone 2 hours a day, 4 hours a day, 14 hours, whatever the number is, right? Most of us get a report like that. And then you can actually look to see what all were you doing when you were on said phone, right? Some of us play an awful lot of Angry Birds or Candy Crush or whatever. What is it what are you bringing in? What are you bringing in? It's an important question. And if you don't like what you're bringing in, you know what? You can do something about it. You can do something about it. So we need to guard what comes in. The next thing we need to do is we need to surround ourselves with wise, godly influences. And so what I would encourage you to do right now, do this right now. Make a little grid, and it's going to look something like this. You're going to put influence in one column, influence, and amount in the next. And what I want you to do is I want you to make a list of the good influences in your life. And you're going to make this list, and it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, after you make your list, I want you to put how much of that are you getting per day, per week, whatever unit of time you need to get, right? And so you may say 15 minutes or 5 minutes or 2 hours or whatever, right? And here's the challenge. If we want to be wisdom, and if we want to gain wisdom, if we want to guard our hearts, you know what we need to do? We need to make this list longer, or we need to make these amounts higher. Can you add one more thing to your list? Or maybe you can't. Can you increase the amount of those good influences? I have a note here, and it reads, good pushes out bad. Good pushes out bad. Light pushes out dark. Light always overpowers, but as soon as you turn the light off, you know what comes right back? The dark. Good will push out bad all the time. We need to align our hearts with God's wisdom. Proverbs 4:7 reads, the beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom. Get it. Go get it. Though it cost all that you have, get understanding. That's a pretty big challenge. That could be a pretty big price tag if it's going to cost all you have. One way to do that is through opening this book every day, or opening your Bible app, whatever your routine is. Expose yourself to. Do this. If you are not reading, let me talk to those of you who are not reading your Bible regularly right now. I'm going to give you a challenge this week. Don't read your Bible this week. Just do this. Just open it up. Each day, find your Bible, open it up, just open it up, and then you can close it. I'll make this prediction. If you start doing that, you're going to get yourself to the point where you're going to say, well, if I open it up, I might as well read something. I might as well read something. If you get up and you put shorts on and tennis shoes, eventually you're going to say, well, maybe I should go for a run. And it doesn't take that, like, you can't tell me you don't have enough time in your day that you couldn't open it. You could open it, right? I had this, and I'm probably way late. I'm very late on time. So let me just close with this. Solomon challenges us to acquire wisdom at any cost. And I don't know that it's because that the wisdom is worth it. I think it's because you're worth it. I think you're worth the wisdom. I do. You know, we talked about this last week. You know, what is your title? If God is king, your title is prince or princess, right? That's your title. Wouldn't a prince or princess be worthy of some royal wisdom? I think they would. I think we should seek out the royal things like what Paul tells us about, including royal wisdom, no matter the cost. Because I think there's a benefit that it would bring to us, but not only that, but it's going to bring a benefit that we will be to others by having that wisdom. So with that, I'm going to put the letters ACT on the board. You know this drill. Based on what you have been presented today, what action will you take? What change will you make? And is there something that you learned today that you can teach to somebody else for your benefit and for theirs? So I'm going to hit stop.